Okay.
His son.
Franklin. All right.
You know that he's just getting over an operation as Billy Graham's son was.
And I hadn't heard, but
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll get some info. I usually get a lot of info from them. All right, we're picking up in chapter 29, verse 26 tonight. I had to change, I don't know if you ever noticed or not, but I put paper clips in my Bible for where I'm teaching so I easily find it. And yesterday, Greg Irby preached from Exodus in a spot I had to move my paper clips. I think he did it on purpose. But we're going to talk now about the food of the priest, as we've talked about the sacrifice, we talked about the outfits that they wear. And why do the priests need to have food? I mean, we all have to have food, but why do they have to be supplied with food? Because they had no land. When the allotment went out, the Levites did not get land. So the priests needed to be supported. And the Lord takes care of his own, and that's how he took care of them. Beginning in verse 26. And thou shalt take the breast of the ram of Aaron's consecration, and wave it as a wave offering before the Lord, and it shall be thy part. And thou shalt sanctify the breast of the wave offering, and the shoulder of the heave offering, which is waved, and which is heaved up, and the ram of consecration, even that which is for Aaron, and which is for his sons. And it shall be Aaron and his sons by statute forever from the children of Israel, for it is a heave offering. And it shall be a heave offering from the children of Israel of the sacrifice of the peace offerings, even their heave offering unto the Lord. As usual, when we go through these, sometimes it's a little complicated to listen to it, because we have two things that are working against us. One is Hebrew, and of course the other is King James English. We don't speak either one of them anymore. So we have to kind of, in our mind, take a look at these things. I would not have made it well during William Tyndale's time. Even though my seminary was named after him, I have a hard time speaking in that type of English. I have a hard time with our English today. And of course, if you go to England, they say we don't speak English at all. But I can't understand their accent anyway. So once again, over in Leviticus, you're going to find that part of an offering went to Aaron and the priest as their part. Now, later on, and this is the rabbit trail, but you'll notice later on that people will be eating sacrifices to idols, and started arguments that we're not going to go into detail. But here, God says, this is for you. There's the difference. God says, this is your part. It hadn't been offered to idols, it's been offered to God himself. And since the Levites were appropriated no land for farming in the nation, this is the way God supplied their support. And they had a job to do, and I don't think many people would really want that job. People talk about wanting to be this or wanting to be that, but it's like anything else. Until you walk a mile in that person's shoes, you don't know what you're asking. Bob Penrod one time said, Katie would get mad. Somebody said, well, pastors don't work for a living. And Katie said, I follow him around for a day. But the priest had jobs to do, and some of them were mundane. Maybe you would think of it boring. And then some of the priests, they're in blood all the time, working at the altar. Who would you want that job? But it's a job appointed by God, and it's by the end of the day, when you're doing these things, how worn out would you be? And God says, this is your portion. You're working for this. And so the people are supporting the priests. So some of the second ram's offering that we saw from last week, a loaf of bread, a cake, a wafer, were given to Aaron and his sons as a wave offering. A wave offering was waved, I said, not from right to left, but back and forth toward the altar of the priest. That symbolized that the offering came from God. It came down, this way. That's why the offering is, rather than like if you were standing on the four corners of the temple later on, and on the time of first fruits, and they would wave this way for what was coming. This is different. So God gave us this. This is for God. It's His. Everything that God shows us, there's a purpose behind it. So those items here that we just mentioned, they weren't burned on the altar. The breast of the ram was to be a wave offering, was eaten by Aaron and his sons. You notice something here. The parts that are left to them seem to be the best parts. And God says, I'm going to give you the best. And He gives us all the best. Sometimes that best is a bologna sandwich, but it's the best that you have. I've often heard people say, I need a new car and I want a Cadillac. And next time you see them, they're driving a 66 Volkswagen. Well, God said, that's all you need. I'm hungry. I like a T-bone steak. God gives you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You're still as full. He gave you what you needed. And that's the way God works. He works with us. So when someone brought a fellowship offering, the animal's breast and thigh were always eaten by the priest. And this way the Israelites contributed to the work of the Lord. It's the same thing we do when you come in on Sundays and you put your little offering into the plate. You're contributing to the work of the Lord. Now, it took an effort to keep things up. Fortunately, our church never moves, does it? It's here. We know when we come on Wednesday night or Sunday morning or Sunday, it's here. And there's no pillar of smoke or fire telling us to load it up and move it down the road. Now think of the job that the priest had. When that tabernacle had to be moved, they had to take everything apart. They had to tote it on their shoulders, and they had to carry it by those rods that were in there. They couldn't touch the ark. Oh, everybody probably wanted to be a priest until the work like that started. But God's preparing for them. Verse 29 says, and the holy garments of Aaron shall be his sons after him, to be anointed therein, and to be consecrated in them. And that son that is priest, in his stead shall put them on 7 days, when he cometh into the tabernacle of the congregation, to minister in the holy place. First, a 7-day consecration service of Aaron's high priestly garments were to be given to his sons who would succeed him and passed on from generation to generation. The high priest, or even all the priests, they died. Every one of them. Aaron might have been priest this year. Next year, one of his sons is going to be high priest. The Lord's going to call Aaron home. Generation after generation after generation. Why? Because they were men, just like us. They had a sin nature and they were going to die. But now we have a high priest, just one, forever. You never have to worry about another high priest. We have Jesus Christ. So only the high priest was given an elaborate ceremony. Remember, the high priest was special in the sense that he's the only one who could enter into the Holy of Holies. And only once a year. And even then he had to enter with what? Blood. He had to first make atonement for himself by the sprinkling of blood, and then for the nation. When we talked about his clothing, you remember the pomegranates and the bells, and they would also, what we don't read here is that rope that was around him. Because if he died, they couldn't go in and get him. They would have to pull him out. I don't know for a fact, but somewhere along those years, there could have been a high priest who died in the Holy of Holies. We don't know. If he touched the ark, we know he did. If he violated God's commands, he did. I'm going on rabbit trails, so watch me tonight. And thou shalt take the ram of the consecration and seethe it his flesh in the holy place. And Aaron and his sons shall eat the flesh of the ram and the breast that is in the basket by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And they shall eat those things wherewith the atonement was made, to consecrate and to sanctify them. But a stranger shall not eat thereof, because they are holy. And if aught the flesh of the consecration or the bread remain until morning, then thou shalt burn the remainder with fire. It shall not be eaten, because it is holy. Keep in mind that we have a lot of times the wrong idea of holy. Sometimes we think holy is just, we have our mindset, oh, this is just, it glows in the dark and it gives up. Holy means it's set aside for a purpose. This food, not to be eaten by strangers, it's set aside for the purpose of the priests. And it's interesting, if they didn't finish it that night, what happened? You don't eat it. No leftover. You burn it with fire. Why? It's holy to be consumed at that time. Take it. There's instructions for eating that part of the ram. At the entrance of the tabernacle, it's repeated again. The ram and the bread, in this case, were communal meal that was eaten there, and there was a sacred nature to it. And as I said, leftovers had to be burned. Kind of reminds me of manna. You didn't have to burn the manna, did you? If you took too much, it got worms in it. And if you didn't take enough, you still didn't go hungry. It's holy. It's set aside for the purpose of God. And thus shalt thou do unto Aaron and his sons, according to all the things which I have commanded thee. 7 days shalt thou consecrate them. And thou shalt offer every day a bullock for a sin offering for the atonement. And thou shalt cleanse the altar when thou hast made an atonement for it. And thou shalt anoint it to sanctify it. 7 days thou shalt make an atonement for the altar and sanctify it. And it shall be an altar most holy. Whosoever toucheth the altar shall be holy. So the consecration service continues 7 days. Of course, 7, the number of perfection, number of completion. And each day a bull was offered as a sin offering. Now the people couldn't help but notice this. I mean, I would pay attention to it, wouldn't you? Here are the priests, the ones who are interceding for you. The high priest is going to intercede before the Lord for you. And 7 days he has to offer a sin offering. What does that tell us? The priests are just like we are. They're sinners. They need blood sacrifice to cover them. This is a repeated thing, the sin offering. And for the people every day, time after time after time, day after day after day, it tells you they're sinners. And there's no cure for it. There's a covering. That's all this is, a covering. But it's pointing to something else. It's pointing to the great high priest. It's pointing to the blood of Christ once for all. They see these things, or they should. So for 7 days thou shalt make an atonement for the altar. It was to be atoned. It's a holy service by means of sacrifices. It's something special, something holy. Yeah, I'm just going to finish up this chapter and we'll be done for the night. So the continual burnt offering was to be continually offered. Verse 38. Now this is that which shall offer upon the altar 2 lambs of the first year, day by day, continually. 1 lamb thou shalt offer in the morning, the other thou shalt offer in the even. And with the 1 lamb, a 10th deal of flour mingled with the 4th part of hin of beaten oil, and a 4th part of hin of wine for a drink offering. If we go over to the book of Leviticus, and Leviticus is like sitting down to me in a law class at Harvard or somewhere, because it is just tells you exactly what the law is. It explains it. In Leviticus, it gives details of this continual burnt offering, far more details than you get in Exodus. But they had all the books. Moses had written them. And so this daily sacrifice, a lamb was offered in the morning and a lamb is offered in the evening. Have you ever given a thought to how many animals were sacrificed? And we're talking about the priest, and we're talking about the people. They had to have massive flocks and herds, didn't they? Because they continually sinned, and there was a continual flowing of blood. Those innocent little lambs, taking the place. I can see them now coming to the gate of the tabernacle there, placing their hands on the head of that animal, saying, identify with that animal. And then having that animal taken and killed and its blood shed. Continually running. That's what people need to remember, how bad sin is. You know, if it hadn't been for sin, death would not have entered into the world. If Adam hadn't sinned, there would have never been a need for the shedding of blood. But there is. You know, this speaks of the fact that people needed a continual reminder that someone or some animal, something had to take their place, that sin merits death. The wages of sin is what? Death. There it is. Something has to be paid. There must be the shedding of blood. Hebrews 9:26 brings out this truth. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once, in the end of the world, hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. You ever wondered why the temple was destroyed in 70 AD? Because it wasn't needed anymore. God gave Israel about 40 years from the time that Jesus' death, burial, resurrection, ascension to heaven. He gave them about 40 years to come to a knowledge of the truth. And then the Romans destroyed the city. You remember what Jesus said, not one stone will be left upon another? You realize that Titus, when they took the city, he said, burn the city, but don't touch the temple. And the flames were so hot that when they looked in there, there was gold running down between the stones. And the order came down, take it apart stone by stone. We want that gold. Jesus said, not one stone upon another. It was not needed any longer. Just like that veil that was ripped from top to bottom. There was no separation anymore. We had peace with God through Jesus Christ. We can come to him boldly. Of course, that verse I just read from Hebrews is talking about the sacrifice, of course, of Jesus Christ. The blood of bulls and goats and lambs could never take away the sin. Never. But the blood of Jesus Christ could. The only sacrifice that's adequate to save you is the blood of Christ. The Lord has dealt adequately with sin. He died once. Once at the end of the age, he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And I'm going to stop there. I actually finished the chapter 2 minutes before 1:45 when I was given permission to speak.